Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us at Welcoming Wellness this afternoon. We are a mental health initiative of White Plains United Methodist Church in Cary, North Carolina, and we are empowering mental health. Our goals are to educate and provide resources for caregivers of people who are helping their loved ones navigate the mental health pathway. We also want to create a community where people feel free of stigma and free to speak up when they need help. So, I'm Robin, and I'm going to be your navigator this afternoon. I want to go back to our last presentation for just a moment, which was on Alzheimer's and dementia. And I want to mention this book. This book is called The 36-Hour Day. This is a wonderful book if you are a caregiver of someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. It's been very helpful for our family as we navigate some dementia that is in our family. Today we're going to hear from Dr. Raychelle Lohmann. She's a respected author and speaker. She has extensive experience in school and in mental health counseling. So let's give Raychelle a hand.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you for Robin. But bullying's not just a schoolyard problem anymore. It doesn't stop at graduation. Whether you're 6 or whether you're 86, you can be susceptible to being bullied. It's not always loud and it's not always physical. Sometimes it can happen silently. Sometimes it's behind closed doors. And sometimes it can even be dressed as a joke. So today we're going to uncover the hidden face of bullying, talk about the different forms of bullying, and talk about some different ways that we as community members can intervene when we see bullying occur. I did bullying, understanding it at every age, because we know that it's not just a schoolyard problem. We know that it just doesn't happen in elementary, middle, or high school. Perhaps many of you have heard bullying is happening in the workplace now. We have lots of different forums, lots of different employees that talk about the harassment that they experience in the workforce. So I'm going to touch on a lot of the different types of bullying that we're seeing occurring nowadays and how that affects our communities. Every 7 minutes, one child or one person will be bullied. So if you think about that through the course of this presentation, many people will have experienced bullying, whether it be online or in public or even playing outside. This could be your niece, this could be your nephew, this could be your grandchild, this could be your child. We know that about 39 million students have reported bullying at some point in time in their lives. That's about 70% of students that go to schools. That's a lot. Only 4% of adults that see all of that bullying or may not know what it is when they're seeing it, because oftentimes the children who bully fly under the radar, so it might not be so easy to point out, but only 4% intervene and only 11% of peers intervene. So what that means for us here today is we've got to do more. We've got to be aware of what bullying is, what it looks like, and how to advocate for people that are being picked on, that are being harassed, and are being exposed to bullying, because it really can cause some severe mental health conditions. And the number of students that don't go to school every day, about 160,000 during the school year. Picture 2 NFL football stadiums in your mind. That's how many students that will avoid going to school because they're afraid, or they don't feel good when they wake up in the morning. A lot of times children will say, I have stomach ache, I have a headache, I don't want to go, I'm afraid of being picked on. Because see, bullying has changed because it crosses the lines from what we used to see, which is that traditional schoolyard bullying. It follows them home now because it's on social media accounts. It's 24/7 and it's hard to escape. And switching gears and talking about adults, 30% of the adult workforce report experiencing bullying. 30%. And 19% of adult workers say they've seen it happen. That's about 74.8 million adults. So as you can see, this just doesn't happen in school. This actually can happen well into adulthood. And technology has definitely given another avenue for bullying to occur. So let's get on the same page of what bullying is, what it looks like. Think about when you think of bullying, what comes to mind? What do you think of? Maybe it's the kid that's sitting alone at lunch. It might be a colleague that's talked over in the boardroom meetings, or maybe it's somebody that's excluded or being left out of chat rooms, conversations. Maybe it's loud, maybe it's subtle. But when we know what to look for, then we know how to stop it. 3 key things when it comes to bullying. Intent to harm. There has to be an intention to harm the other person. Repetition. That's big. Bullying isn't the same thing as being mean. It is mean, but you can be mean and not bully. So 2 different things. There has to be a repetitive pattern. These youth are often targeted, and we'll talk about targeting. And I know based on the statistics that we've discussed that many of you sitting in this room at some point in time in your life have experienced some form of bullying. And when we talk about adults, just wait until I show you the sectors that it's occurring in, the workplace sectors. You might be surprised, and you might not. The other thing is there's always a power imbalance. The children who are bullying oftentimes have power or feel like they do, because what they want to do is they want to exclude, oust, socially isolate the other child or adult. So there's 3 things that come to mind with bullying: repetitive, power imbalance, and intent to cause harm. Now, if we're working with a young child, they're not going to know what a power imbalance is. So I put a definition down here that can help when talking to younger children to help them understand what bullying is. Basically, it's someone being mean to you on purpose. It's happening over and over again. And it makes you feel sad, scared, or left out. See, we have to start early discussing bullying with children, because the number one place that it happens, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I'm already getting ahead of myself, is middle school. That's where we see the most bullying occur. And if you've ever worked with middle schoolers, perhaps that's no surprise to you, because that's really when they're getting more autonomy, breaking away from their parents a little bit more, and finding their own voice. And no one's watching them as much because they do have more autonomy. So there's more opportunities for bullying to happen. So we've got to jump into the elementary schools and do a better job being proactive in teaching elementary students, using definitions that they can understand, discussing it with them so when they do get older, they know how to behave more appropriately with their peers. There's wonderful months out there like October. If you really want to get involved in bullying, that is your anti-bullying month. There's a lot of activities. The PACER organization, Stomp Out Bullying, the Cyberbullying Research Center are excellent resources that already have various activities in place for the month. You can just go in, tap into these resources, download curriculums if you're an educator, or do something to get the community involved to help stomp out bullying. What bullying is not. Sometimes when we use words, they become very, they become very popular. And sometimes we misuse what we're talking about. So bullying is not calling someone a name. We might get mad at someone driving down the road, maybe a little bit slower or faster or cuts us off, and we might call them a choice word. That's not bullying. Again, it's not repetitive, and we haven't singled a person out. It's not pushing someone once. If you think of elementary students in a line and someone cuts in front and the other kids pushes them one time, that's being mean. That deserves a conversation, redirection of behavior, but that's not bullying. It's not being rude. Many of us, if that's the case, we've all been bullying someone at some point in time. And it's not having an argument. Again, it's power imbalance, it's repetitive, and it is an intent to cause harm on the other person. And then there's cyberbullying. And I think when we think back into the early 2000s, Amanda Todd really made the case for cyberbullying when she took her own life and did so by showing note cards on the screen for how she was feeling being singled out online. This is happening in so many different ways, from TikTok to Instagram to Snapchat to gaming. Gaming consoles where kids are playing with other kids online. Some they know, some they don't know. And what we know with gaming consoles is boys are more susceptible to bullying through gaming consoles, but girls are more susceptible to bullying overall. And are oftentimes targeted for their looks, their body, differences. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different forms and things that youth are singled out for. And when we talk about bullying in the workplace, what we're really looking at is actions to silence someone, to put them down. Oftentimes, if you think about it, workplace is a breeding ground for bullying. We just don't think about it because why? We're adults. We shouldn't behave that way. But high-paced, competitive work environments where it is a ladder, corporate, or not even corporate, it happens in the educational sector as well with educators, where you are climbing the ladder, it causes a very susceptible breeding ground for bullying to occur. So it can continue well into adulthood, and that's why we need to have workplaces to put firm policies in place and a safe place for employees to report that, because again, 30% of employees have reported being bullied. I have a few little quotes scattered throughout, and I really like this one from JFK. One person can make a difference and everyone should try. So now that we've talked about what bullying is and some of the different types of bullying, we all have a role to play in stopping it. And we'll talk a little bit about what makes a child or person susceptible to being bullied. So oftentimes these are personality traits or dispositions that can really affect or put a target, if you will, on some children. Not always, and there is nothing wrong because many of us have these traits that you're seeing. However, when we talk about the power, oftentimes children who bully will look for children with these traits or people with these traits because they're probably not going to tell, or they feel that there's that power imbalance and they've got more power than this other child. So things like a quiet and shy child, because they don't draw attention to themselves. They're easier to pinpoint and target, probably not going to tattletale on you either. And when you feel, oftentimes children who bully feel powerless, so they want control and they want power, and that's what they desire. There might be jealousy because they see that the other child or person has something, or might be even in the workplace, might be better at something than they are, so they see them as a threat. So what they want to do is tear the other person down. It could also be a child who is more of a loner, doesn't have a lot of friends. Again, if they have a lot of friends, odds are those friends are going to stand up for them. So again, these are the kids that might be susceptible to being picked on. They might be physically weak or lack confidence. If they appear unconfident, again, they're not going to speak up. They might have some type of vulnerability. They might look nervous. They might look scared when they see these kids come around. And these kids then know, like, what are they going to do? And then they keep attacking, repetitive, non-assertive. So you can begin to see there's kind of a pattern here. Oftentimes it's usually the quiet kid. And a lot of the times from what I've seen, it can be the kid who who may be more talented, I remember in high school, one of the high schools I worked at, I'll tell you a story, new student came from another school to the school, and he was big. I said, he's a football player. I could just look at him. And guess what? He was a football player. And so I walked him down the hall to show him where his class was. And when I was walking, because I was kind of short and blended in with a lot of the students, and they didn't see me, but they saw the kid behind me, the football player. And I'll never forget the feeling that I felt walking down the hall with that football player from the football team that was already standing where they normally congregated in the hallway. They started looking at him. They started sizing him up and started whispering. And I just remembered that feeling of uncomfortability that I was feeling as an adult and could only imagine what this brand new student was feeling walking down the hall, because he had to go out and practice with them that afternoon. They didn't know this kid. He definitely didn't fit quiet, shy, but he was a threat. He was a threat to someone's potential position on that team. So they were already going to work together as a group and size him to where he needed to be to make sure that he knew his spot. You think, just kids? No. I was in an assisted living home the other day, and you go there at dinner time or lunchtime, and you'll notice that people sit in the same place. Go try to sit in their chair, and then, I got to stand here. I get to moving. Go try to sit in their chair and come back and tell me how that goes for you. I already see some of you shaking your head like, we already know that's not going to go over too well. You probably won't be sitting there the next time you go there and have a seat in the cafeteria, because you've been through the nonverbals or through the verbals have been told you're on territory. So it happens. That's why I said from 6 to 86, bullying is something that continues to happen. So we talked about personality characteristics or traits, but also it's important to talk about something called identity-based bullying. And this has nothing to do with personality characteristics or traits. This is actually, they're bullied for who they are. They're bullied for what they believe, their gender identity, their sexual orientation. They are singled out for race and ethnicity. So what makes this bullying so difficult is because it's either real or perceived differences, and they're targeted for who they are. And when that happens, that really can scare other kids who may be of that same faith base, who also might be. For example, we know the LGBTQ plus community experiences a very high level of bullying, about 80% when we look at children who are bullied. So this is very scary when we get into people being discriminated and stereotyped based on their identity. And other youth or people of similar identities step back and watch that happen, and then they become fearful. As I was mentioning, got some statistics here for you. The LGBTQ plus youth, again, 82% reported bullying during their school years. This population is the highest population of youth to self-harm or follow through with suicide. This population of youth oftentimes don't have outlets to communicate or express, or advocates or allies to talk to. So they suppress everything. They get picked on, they get ostracized. Suicide, second leading cause of death with our nation's youth. We've got a problem. Students with disabilities, 2 to 3 more times. That's 66.33333% of youth with a disability that's singled out and picked on for that disability. Whether it be stuttering, whether it be walking issues, whether it be hearing issues, whether it be a learning disability. Students' faith. A quarter of our population are singled out because what they believe. And when we look at students, this is going into the school. This is where the majority of this is happening, is in our school system. So I've been in education for many years. It's my responsibility too. It's all of our responsibility to do something. And you might go, well, I don't work in education. But you can work with educators to support them because they have a big job ahead of them. And we've got to do a better job based on the data that we're seeing. Females, 38% more likely to experience bullying than males. And oftentimes that's body shaming or stuff to do with their body, which can really affect their self-esteem and self-worth. I work in private practice, and most of the females that I see that are adolescents through young adulthood really struggle with their identity, with their self-esteem, with how they look. So we've really got to tap in and know that these are some high at-risk populations for being bullied. Top 3 reasons youth report being bullied. Physical appearance. 44% of youth said that they were bullied because of how they look. Their sexual orientation, and race and ethnicity. And again, with race and ethnicity and these other characteristics, it really can become a form of discrimination. I want to switch gears for a second, though, because we've been talking about youth who are bullied, but I want to talk about the youth who does the bullying. If you've noticed, I have not used intentionally the word bully. Bullying is a behavior, not a child, not a person. It's a behavior. And it's important that we understand that those youth who do the bullying oftentimes have a lot of other things going on, whether it be that they've been abused at home or maybe neglected, or according to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children with mental health disorders are 3 times as likely to engage in bullying behavior. So these youth are also hurting in some way, or they're lacking the skills to appropriately communicate. They might feel that they don't have power or control at home, and this is their way to exercise it when they get to the school environment or with other peers. So really understanding that we're dealing with a behavior that we can work with, that we can redirect, that we can also give empathy to, because they are also youth and children, and they need our compassion as well. And a lot of times we do the opposite because they're in the wrong. So we resort to discipline and punishing behaviors. So what do we do with these youth as well to help them? And another quote here. This one's an unknown source, anonymous source. Strong people stand up for themselves, but the strongest people stand up for others. And that's our role as community members, as educators, as we've got some younger people in the room, as youth, to stand up. Because again, 11% of upstanders don't speak out when they see bullying occur, oftentimes because they don't want it turned on them. They don't want to get in the middle of it because they don't want what the other child's receiving. So let's talk about a few of the forms of bullying. Verbal. That's the one we probably most all know, is name calling, slurs. Again, this is repeated. Teasing. In adults, it can come off as sarcasm. It could come kind of masking hostility and shaming. in meetings. Oftentimes when I've heard of adult bullying and worked with adults who have been bullied in the workplace, it's really more of that competitive atmosphere and a means to silence them and to shut them down. There's also social and relational bullying. That's that exclusion and starting rumors about other people. And with adults, it can look in the form of gossip, cliques, excluding people from outside work outings, maybe going out with other colleagues and hanging out with them and excluding that one person and not even mentioning it to them. And there's also physical bullying. That's where with children that can come up hitting, shoving, more physical, outward aggression. And with adults, it might be property damage. There were, without saying names, allegations in the news. If you've watched any of the stuff with a rapper on the news lately, and there was another rapper whose car was destroyed, allegedly for purposes of intimidation and causing fear amongst that other rapper. Bullying behavior? If that happened, absolutely. Because it was a means to silence and scare. So, again, can happen in the adult world too. The psychological, this is where we can really get into seeing a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and prolonged exposure to bullying as a child can lead to what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, because it is a trauma. It is a fear that that child has to go unless something is done. They have to go to school. They have to interact with these same people on a daily basis. And that can lead a lot of kids to dropping out of school, homeschool, or finding other ways where they don't have to interact with these people because it can make them sick and not feel good. And especially if they don't feel that they have advocates or allies that can help them combat the problem. And oftentimes, educators don't see it when it's happening because these youth can be quite sneaky. And so can adults, by the way. And the places that bullying happens the most is middle school, reporting about 28%, high school, 16%, elementary is 9%, and then combined schools, that's mixed up, middle school, high school, elementary school, middle school, that is at 12%. So we really got to start early because we see that spike exponentially whenever they get to middle school. When it comes to cyberbullying, Snapchats, TikToks, mocking peers, exclusion from group chats, screenshots of private messages, and then releasing those to publics, and doxing in game communities. These are all forms of bullying. And doxing, if you don't know, it just means getting someone's private information and then sharing it to larger groups. And where is this happening? Well, what teens are telling us is the number one place is Instagram. And then the second place that we're beginning to see it happen is Facebook. And what I tell parents that are like, well, I don't feel comfortable with my teen having all of these social media sites because I really worry about their self-esteem. I say, listen to your gut. Listen to your gut. If you don't feel comfortable with your child having access because you know they're going to constantly be looking at what's being said about them or whether people like what they've posted, then maybe you do need to, tone back or scroll back some of the access to these sites because a lot of these sites aren't healthy for our youth, especially as they're beginning to develop who they are, their sense of purpose. And I know youth don't like when I say, for parents to monitor more because it is a part of their communication. So it's important. And it's not the youth that are being targeted that are in the wrong. So it's not punishment. It's just knowing that the platforms and who they're communicating with, because some parents who are being responsible, checking in, making sure, that what their child's got, what they're into online, it's the other kid's parent who's not. And that kid's the one that can cause a lot of psychological harm. A side story, during COVID, my daughter was in high school, and she just deleted her social media apps. And I'm like, wow. I mean, when your child parents themselves, that's awesome, right? And I'm like, why did you? Because you're not hanging out with your friends as much now. Like, this is where I would open up that door for you to have more social media connections with your friends. And she said, I don't like how it makes me feel. I spend too much time on it. These companies are known to want your child to come back. How many of you have ordered something or maybe even left Bixby or Siri on accidentally and we're talking about something and open up your phone and there it is. There's your algorithm. And now every time you open your phone, it's dangling that carrot in front of you. Buy me. Look at these shoes you were just looking at Nordstrom. Let's order them. That's IT's job. That is big tech, not IT. That's big tech's job. They're to market to us. AI does a wonderful, how many of you are using AI? I won't even ask. Yeah, AI will do a wonderful job now. It'll help you draft an email. It will help you do all kinds of wonderful things. Bells and whistles are on our machines, and they are drawing us in, and they are drawing our youth in. And if you're a scroller, and I do it too, I can sit there on my phone and all of a sudden 30 minutes can be gone. We're adults. We know that we should put boundaries there. Youth aren't developed to that point yet. And these industries are really tapping in to get them. We know that constantly going to a lot of these sites actually can trigger the reward center part of the brain and release the feel-good, endorphins, adrenaline. And so what happens? We want to go back and check. That's why when we post something, you walk away from it. If you're youth, they might go back and check again and again and again. And it becomes a repetitive behavior. So just knowing that there is some neuropsychology involved into what we're taking in. So teaching youth to put their own boundaries there, kind of like my daughter did. I'm not saying you have to go cold turkey like she did, but to this day, she still doesn't have, because she said, I wouldn't get everything done that I want to get done. And I'm like, good for you. I need to learn some things from you, kiddo. Now she's in college and she still doesn't do a lot with social media. Now there will be times when I know when she gets into her career, even when I write books, even though I want to avoid social media, my publisher says social media. Or do you want to do a podcast about this? And so we do have to connect, but finding that healthy balance, because I believe there is a healthy balance. We just have to also teach that to our youth. You know, there was a study done, and now I can't remember who did it. It was a few years back, and it said that youth actually wish their parents would put more restrictions on them because they get hooked in and then they waste their time, or they're up into the wee hours of the morning scrolling on their phones. And then adult forms of cyberbullying, harassment, whether it be through Slack, Reddit, or Teams. Facebook group pile-ons, that's where people just kind of start piling on to the person, like what it sounds like, or trolling, and then posting fake reviews or revenge posts. When I was doing some of this stuff for the adults, I'm just like shaking my head saying, crying out loud, how are we going to teach our youth if we're doing it as adults? I mean, we need to step it up. We need to step it up. And odds are, I'm talking to the wrong audience because you aren't the ones doing it because you're sitting in the presentation. I need to get out there somewhere where these people are actually engaging in this. And we want to talk about industries. See if any of these surprise you. Number one industry, retail. And this could even be customers that will go after you and want to break down your reputation. Maybe you're a business owner and you've got a disgruntled customer. that keeps trolling you or sending out nasty messages or giving you all these bad reviews one after another because they just keep on setting up different identities online. Healthcare industry. There actually has been a lot of reported bullying between doctors and nurses. Again, we've got a structural ladder here. We've got people trying to climb a hierarchy. Hospitality industry, education, and even the IT industry. Now, that would be interesting to know whether the IT industry engages in more cyberbullying. What do you think? I think maybe, since that's their form of communication most of the time at work. All right. So the big thing now is bullying's complex because it's interconnected, and we can't get away from it. It's not schoolyard bullying anymore. And it's gone from youth all the way well into adulthood. So to quote Barack Obama, each of us deserves the freedom to pursue our own version of happiness. No one deserves to be bullied. So turning the corner, let's talk about a few of the warning signs that you may see of someone who is experiencing bullying. There could be unexplained injuries or lost belongings, other youth stealing things from them. We've talked about what we call psychosomatic conditions. That could be headaches. That could be stomach aches. I've seen panic attacks occur. Changes in eating and sleeping habits. Again, a lot of worry, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. Declining school performance. If you remember, we just filled up 2 NFL stadiums of kids that miss school every day because of being bullied. What do you think's happening to their academics when they're not at school? They're missing out on classroom instruction. And then when they go, they're further behind. They avoid social situations or have a loss of friends, feelings of helplessness and low self-esteem. Again, this is concerning because we are seeing more and more youth reporting anxiety and depression than in the past, and self-destructive behaviors, which could come in the form of self-injury, cutting, harming. And switching gears to the kid who is actually doing the bullying, what we see if we don't intervene and help these youth learn different ways to communicate and express themselves is they have a higher tendency to have academic problems, drop out of school, drug and alcohol use, get in trouble with the law, exhibit violent, aggressive behaviors, and also are at an increased risk of suicide. So whether it's the child who's being targeted or the one that's perpetrating the actions, I think one thing we can see is there's a whole lot of hurt within both of those populations. And why do they stay silent? Well, if it's cyberbullying, they don't want you taking away their phone or their electronics. That's what a lot of youth have told me. Well, if I tell, then my parents are going to take away, and I'm not the one doing it, and they're not. Again, they're not the ones that are doing the behavior. They also don't tell because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of having a spotlight shined on them. They're afraid of what other people will think. Well, they think that they're weak. So it's easier to just stay behind the scenes and stay silent. We've really got to connect with our educators, our community leaders, so kids know that they have an adult, a circle of support, people who have their back that they can go to. And it might not be parents. That might be the last person they'll go to. It might be a coach. It might be a church youth group leader. It might be a friend's parent. So my philosophy is the more responsible adults that we can put in our children's life. I'm kind of one of those that takes a village. If we can know that our kids have responsible, good adults to go to for guidance and be okay if it's not us, just that they have somebody that they can go to. And as Eleanor Roosevelt says, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. So for those youth that are being targeted and those employees, Go get some counseling, learn some assertion skills, some clever comebacks, what I call them. Learn to value your worth again. Don't let someone strip you from your identity. Don't let them strip you from your self-worth. And know that they probably have bigger issues going on, and that does not excuse their behavior, but they don't deserve to take your power away from you. And bullying prevention, what we can do, we need to set clear expectations. We need to train early. I wish phone providers would give booklets to parents before they give their child the phone. I wish they would offer community seminars. I've got all these ideas. I just want to go to Verizon. That's my provider. I'm not just picking on Verizon. But I want to say, you need to be doing this. I asked one parent one time when I was in the phone store, how old their child was when they got the phone, and they said 2. They bought a phone for their child at 2. Let me tell you why. It was a divorce situation, and they needed to have all of the minutes and times that they let their child speak to the other parent on that phone, on a separate phone, not their phone, because 2 adults didn't communicate with one another when they were co-parenting this little child. So at the age of 2, child got their own phone. I've seen children, and maybe you have too, 3, 4 years old, holding a phone, punching faster than I can, playing games, watching. I saw a baby in a stroller the other day at South Point Mall with a bottle propped in its mouth, drinking, pushing buttons on the mom's phone, playing a game. So we've got to do a better job as adults in preparing our youth for the technology that we're handing to them. This is not a phone. This is a computer we've given them, and we've just set them out on the World Wide Web. The super fast-paced highway for information, exposing them to anything and everything with one swipe. So gone is the phone days. I mean, I used to like those days. I remember when my grandmother had a phone, and when I picked it up, she had this thing called a party line. And I would sit there and giggle and muffle the thing and laugh because I was eavesdropping. Okay, that's not right, but I was little and it was quite funny. But this does way more than that party line does. So I can only imagine if I was eavesdropping on my great aunt, I could really get myself into trouble with one of these as a child. And we just release them. We hand our phones over to kids. So we've got to do a better job. The community needs to do a better job. The phone providers need to do it. It doesn't fall on one entity. It doesn't just fall on the educators. It falls on all of us. Schools, many of them have policies. But again, oftentimes these youth are hard to catch because they don't do it right in front of your nose. They're sneaky. And we also have to do a better job of teaching faculty and staff on how to identify the signs of bullying. The child who there's always an empty desk there. Or maybe all of a sudden in first period, there's always an empty desk, but sometimes they make it to second period. We've got a pattern here. What's going on? Could something be going on at home? Could something be going on at school during that first period class? So there are themes and patterns we can be trained to watch for. We also have to have open dialogue. We need to monitor our youth when they're on these devices, and we need to teach peers that we need 99.9% of them being an upstander, standing up when they see another peer, because they're going to be the ones we need to empower. They're going to be the ones that are going to be more apt to see it occurring than the adults. We've got to do a better job in the workplace environment for adults. We've got to, empower where employees can go to HR representatives and not feel that there's going to be retaliation, especially if it is a supervisor or a boss that's doing the bullying. We've also got to make more mental health easily accessible for employees. A lot of companies that offer EPAs, many of them are going to AI counseling. That scares me as a counselor. Yeah, you can get 10 sessions and you can talk to a computer. Weeza, you can look her up. A lot of Bosch, Bose, Palmolive, Colgate, some of the big companies are going towards these AI-generated models of counseling. And we need to set boundaries online and offline. Clear boundaries to prevent bullying. And if I have any Swifties out there, Taylor Swift said it best in this one quote, and it's a good wrap up. You will always be criticized and teased and bullied for things that make you different. But usually, those things will be what sets you apart. The things that set you apart from the pack, the things that you once thought were your weaknesses will someday become your strengths. So leave it to Taylor Swift to really tie up today's presentation. So let's make a commitment to being the reason that someone feels seen, supported, and safe, because no one should have to face bullying alone. Thank you so much for attending today's presentation.
Thank you, Raychelle. That was wonderful. We all have a role to play. You know, we think, well, I don't have any young children, I don't have any grandchildren. We all have a role to play. So that's what I'm going to take away from today. Thank you so much. Our next presentation is on July 27th, and this presentation will be on grief and its effects on children and teenagers. Now, some of you will probably remember a few months ago we had Chris Ford come and talk about grief and its long-term effects on adults. She's going to come back and talk to us about children and teenagers because she says that's a very different situation, very different process. So she will be here. It's going to be a wonderful presentation. I hope you can all come back. I did want to let you know that our Welcoming Wellness services are free, but if you go on our website at welcomingwellnessnc.com, there is a Donate Now button. So if you found this to be helpful and would like to donate, we invite you to do so. And thank you for joining us today. I hope you have a good afternoon and good mental health.